Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeff Rumberg. I'm a managing partner with MetricNet, and I'll be your host for today's webcast on desktop support best practices. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for participating in our webcast today. Before we get started, I have just a few administrative announcements to make. During the presentation, all of you will be in listen-only mode. However, if you have any questions during the webcast, you can type them in the dialog box that appears in the lower right corner of your screen, and I'll pause once during the presentation to answer questions. Additionally, I'll remain on the webcast at the conclusion of the presentation to answer any final questions that you might have or that I did not get to during the first Q&A break. Now, this webcast typically lasts for about 90 minutes. So for those who have other commitments later in the day, I should be wrapped up by about 3:30 p.m. or so Eastern Time in the United States. Now, I see that quite a few of our existing clients have joined us on the webcast today, and I want to thank you for that. For those who are not familiar with MetricNet, let me give you just a brief introduction. Our core business at MetricNet is benchmarking. We perform benchmarks for a variety of industries and functional areas. My role in the business is to manage the desktop support, service desk, and call center benchmarks and assessments for MetricNet. The work we do for desktop support organizations worldwide spans the gambit, from benchmarking and ITIL maturity assessments to consolidation studies and outsourcing analyses. Typically, the IT service and support organizations that we work with are looking to optimize their performance, and we help them achieve that objective through benchmarking. For those who have not been to our website yet, I would encourage you to go and take a look around at metricnet.com. One of the unique features of the website is that we offer a free premium membership that gives you unlimited access to all of our online content. This includes our metric of the month, our webcast recordings, our white papers, and presentations. All you have to do is complete a short form, and you will be enrolled as a free premium member. Each time you visit our website thereafter, you can go directly to our resource library and access all of our online content absolutely free of charge. Now, since the question of how to benchmark comes up in every webcast, I'll preempt the question right now and give you just a brief overview of MetricNet's benchmarking lineup. There are 4 ways that you can complete a benchmark with MetricNet. 3 are shown on this page. The next one I'll get to on the next page. First, there are what we call peer group benchmarks. They compare and measure your desktop support, service desk, or call center performance to a unique peer group. These are our custom benchmarks, and they're very comprehensive in scope. Secondly, if you're only interested in an industry benchmark and industry benchmarking data, you can download a benchmarking report directly from our website. Just go to metricnet.com, click the Shop button, and you will see our industry benchmarks that are available for download. For those do-it-yourselfers, you can purchase a benchmarking data file in Excel format and conduct your own benchmarking analysis. And finally, for those interested in a continuous improvement initiative, MetricNet earlier this year launched its one-year path to world-class performance. This program starts with a benchmark and an ROI calculation of your service and support organization. Following that is a 6 to 9 month improvement phase with MetricNet as your coach and guide. The program concludes with a second benchmark and ROI calculation about a year after the initial benchmark to objectively measure the progress that's been made and to prove definitively that your support organization has indeed achieved world-class performance. Now, regardless of how or when you choose to benchmark your organization, I want to encourage all of you to connect with MetricNet on social media. We're active on all the major social media sites. We put out a steady stream of posts, tweets, articles, discussions, and presentations that are designed to enrich the community of IT service and support professionals and to provide you with tools, insights, and information that you can use to enhance your professional careers. For those who'd like to follow us on Twitter during the webcast, use hashtag MetricNetLive. This allows you to participate, share your thoughts, key points, ask questions, or just follow along with the webcast. For those who are attending the Fusion Conference in Washington, D.C. next week, I want to make you aware of the fact that MetricNet has been selected as a speaker, and I will be presenting MetricNet's latest research on the trade-off between cost and quality in service and support, and how to strike the optimal balance between those competing objectives. This is session 302, and it's scheduled for Monday, October 20th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so just 6 days from today. For those who are interested, we hope to see you at the presentation, and if I haven't met you yet, please come up and introduce yourself. If you would like to schedule time for a brief consultation with MetricNet while you're at Fusion, you can do so directly on our website. Just go to metricnet.com/schedule, and you can schedule time for a brief consultation with MetricNet. Now, one final note before we get started, and this is particularly important for those who wish to receive a copy of today's presentation. When you exit the webcast, a brief survey will pop up on your screen. Please be aware that only those who complete the survey will receive a copy of the presentation. This survey provides us with valuable feedback on the webcast. It's only 3 questions long, and it takes about 15 seconds to complete. So if you do us a favor and answer that question at the end of the survey at the end of the webcast, I'd be very grateful, and in return for that courtesy, I'll send you a copy of today's presentation. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We've got 4 items on our agenda today, and we're going to cover the first 3 of those 4 items, starting with a historical perspective. We're going to talk about some of the industry's megatrends and how IT service and support is being reshaped away from its historical role as a peer support activity into a more strategic source of competitive advantage for organizations that recognize and understand how to exploit and leverage the possible competitive advantage in service and support. Secondly, we're going to look at MetricNet's model for desktop support best practices. This model is empirical in nature. It covers 4 key areas. We look at service and support strategy. We look at performance measurement and management. We look at human resource management. And we look at what we call marketing, which is really about managing your message to key stakeholders, not just those who call in to desktop support, not those who need a move, add, change, or a break fix, but all stakeholders, including those in IT as well as those outside of information technology. We're going to talk about this best practices model, and this is where we're going to spend most of our time in today's discussion. We're going to wrap up with a call to action. I'm going to summarize what you've learned and heard here today and give you 6 specific ideas that you can take forward to capitalize on today's insights and learnings. So let's take a look first at our historical perspective. First point I'd like to make is that everything you see and hear today is empirical in nature. We've been at this for a long time, more than a quarter of a century now. And as a result, we have the largest database of IT process and performance indicators in the industry. It's a database that covers nearly 100 separate countries. We have more than 3,000 IT service and support organizations in the database who have participated at one time or another in MetricNet benchmarks. We track more than 70 key performance indicators, everything from cost per ticket and customer satisfaction to speed of answer and call abandonment rate. We have also empirically observed and cataloged and created a taxonomy of more than 120 industry best practices, everything from IT service and support strategy to technology, human resource management, process and procedure, and performance measurement and management. What you're seeing today is a condensed version, of a full-day seminar that MetricNet delivers on desktop support best practices. So what we've done is we've skinnied it down to the most important elements, those key success factors for running a world-class desktop support organization. Now I'd like to start by pointing out some interesting data. We have data that goes all the way back to 1988 in some key areas, metrics like the number of desktop tickets per seat per month, the cost per ticket, the average work time for an incident, the percentage of incidents resolved on first contact, the percentage of tickets that are resolved that could have and should have been resolved at level 1. We call that percent resolved level 1 capable. We've got some interesting data on starting salaries for technicians, and then we've looked at the cost of supporting one seat for 1 year. And again, we've got 2 sets of data here, one going all the way back to 1988, 26 years ago, and one from last year. If we look at the number of tickets per seat, it's gone from about 0.5 tickets per seat per month to about 0.8 tickets per seat per month. This is a reflection of the increased complexity that sits on most desktops today. That's not a surprise. It's interesting to look at the cost per ticket. This is a fully loaded cost. We look at technician salaries and benefits. We look at the salaries and benefits of indirect personnel such as team leads and workforce schedulers and supervisors and trainers, QA/QC people. We also look at the facilities cost, the technology expense, the telecommunications cost. We look at travel, training, office supplies, all the expenses that are considered to be part of that desktop support delivery. Take those costs divided by the ticket volume, and back in 1988, the number was about $29. By last year, that number had gone up to about $62. Now, the reason is that the average work time per incident has increased. It's gone from just under 18 minutes, 17 minutes, 40 seconds, to more than 32 minutes. This is the actual work time per incident. This doesn't include travel time. This is once you get to the site of the incident, you take off the tool belt or you pull out the voltmeter or take out the screwdriver and you start working on that individual's problem, whether it's a break fix, whether it's a hard drive failure, a motherboard that needs to be replaced, whatever the case might be. The incident work time has almost doubled since 1988. Now here's where the data gets very interesting. If we look at the percentage of incidents that are resolved on the initial contact, back in 1988 it was 74%. Last year it was only 68%. Now this is interesting. We do know that complexity has increased over the last 26 years, but I would not have expected the incident first visit resolution rate to have dropped like that. But there's an explanation. And here's where it gets really interesting. If we look at the number of tickets resolved by desktop support that could have and should have been resolved at level 1 by the service desk remotely, back in 1988 it was 54%. Now that's a reflection of the fact that back in 1988 a lot of service desks were really nothing but glorified message-taking services. They'd take an incoming call, they would do the easy stuff like a password reset, maybe a printer reset or a printer recycle, and then almost everything else got pushed out to desktop support. And so more than half of what was being done in 1988 by desktop support were things that could have and should have been done at level 1 remotely. And there's a reason that they should have been done remotely, and you'll see momentarily what the economic benefit of getting things done at level 1 is. But last year that number had decreased to 22%. This is a good thing. But it still says that 22% of the tickets resolved at desktop support could have and should have been resolved at level 1. These represent defects. What it says is that more than a fifth of all tickets resolved by desktop support in North America last year were defects. They were defects because they should have and could have been resolved at level 1. Nevertheless, it's a huge improvement from the percent resolved level 1 capable in 1988. Now, starting technician salaries last year were about $43,500. If we adjust for inflation, back in 1988, the number was only about $37,000. The reason for this is as follows. It's not because IT is becoming more altruistic. It's not because service and support organizations have money to throw around, quite the contrary. But it's the recognition of the fact that when you're willing to pay a little bit more for a starting resource, a technician in desktop support, you get a more qualified person, a better trained person, a more experienced person, and oftentimes a better educated person. And that translates into quicker resolution times. It translates into higher first contact resolution rates. It drives higher levels of customer satisfaction, and ironically, it actually drives a lower cost per ticket. So paying more for quality resources, people who are more experienced, better educated, more qualified to do this job, doesn't increase your cost. It actually reduces your cost per ticket because those more qualified resources are able to get more done on first contact, and their work times and handle times tend to be a little bit less than those who are less qualified. So this is actually a positive trend. It says that IT service and support recognizes value and they're willing to pay a little bit more for a more qualified, better educated, more experienced resource. Now, if we put all this together, look at the number of tickets per seat per month, the cost per ticket, and so on. Back in 1988, it cost just under $200 a year to support one seat. Last year, that number had grown to almost $600 for a couple of reasons. Number one, more tickets per seat, and number two, higher cost per ticket. So you put it all together, it costs nearly $600 of desktop support resources to support a seat for 1 year. So there's an interesting tale to be told here. And one of those tales is this. Back in 1988, desktop support was operated largely as an overflow mechanism for level 1 support. That's why half the tickets they resolved could have and should have been resolved at level 1. But there are more tickets now being resolved per seat per month by desktop support than there were back in 1988. Again, this is due to the increased complexity of the environment. The cost has gone up accordingly. The handle times have gone up. But more than anything else, this is a recognition of the fact that IT service and support represents a strategic function, and you can leverage this to drive a positive view of corporate IT, to minimize total cost of ownership, and to drive and increase the productivity of end users. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to show you the evidence. I'm going to show you the data that backs up all those claims momentarily. But before I do that, let me make a distinction between two different types of tickets. Now, this is MetricNet's vernacular. It's roughly equivalent to the way the industry views this, but there is no common vernacular for what describes or distinguishes or defines an incident versus what defines or distinguishes or describes a service request. But tickets fundamentally are broken down into two categories. You have incidents and you have service requests. Incidents tend to be unplanned. Things like hardware break fix, device failures, connectivity failures are typical incidents. Service requests, by contrast, are typically planned work that requires a physical touch. Things like a physical move, add, change, a hardware or software upgrade, a device refresh, a device setup. But again, incident volume plus service request volume, you add those together and you get your total ticket volume. But there is a fundamental difference between an incident and a service request. The primary difference being that incidents typically are unplanned, service requests generally are planned. You put them together, combine them, and you have your total ticket volume. Now, throughout this presentation, I'm going to use the terminology world-class and best-in-class quite frequently, and so it makes sense to define right up front what a world-class desktop support organization looks like. And there are four components of our definition here. The first is that desktop support will consistently exceed customer expectations. Well, as you can imagine, this results in high levels of customer satisfaction, but it also means that you have to keep your MTTRs, your mean times to resolve, below the average for the industry. What that means is that you're resolving incidents in less than 0.7 work days, and you're resolving service requests or fulfilling service requests in less than 3.8 work days. Those are the top quartiles in the industry for that. And this is the top quartile for customer satisfaction in the industry. So that's the first component, is high quality. Second component is that you have to manage your costs effectively. You want those to be at or below the industry average level. So you look at your cost per ticket, your cost per incident, your cost per service request to ensure that they're below the industry average level. And you also want to be minimizing your total cost of ownership. The way you do that is that you minimize the percent resolved level 1 capable. You try and eliminate these defects because on average last year in North America it was $62 to resolve a ticket at desktop support. The comparable number at level 1 support was only $22. And so world-class organizations recognize this, and they try and minimize the number of tickets that they resolve at desktop support to the point where in many cases they will reassign them to level 1 support if they identify a ticket that can and should be resolved at level 1. Thirdly, and a little bit more subjectively, desktop support will follow industry best practices. Now, these best practices are pretty well defined and documented at this point. What you're seeing today is a condensed version of MetricNet's full-day seminar on desktop support best practices. But to follow those is pretty straightforward. The good news is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to figure these things out on your own. You don't have to learn by trial and error. The industry's best practices in desktop support are pretty well defined and documented at this point. And if your organization is following those industry best practices, that's an important criterion of a world-class desktop support organization. Finally, and perhaps most subjectively, is that you want to be adding value on every transaction. Now, if you're adding value on every transaction, you're going to drive a positive customer experience. You're going to create a positive customer experience, and you're going to drive a positive view of IT overall. So these are the four elements. These are the four criteria that are necessary to be classified and qualified as a world-class desktop support organization. Top quartile customer satisfaction, top quartile cost, which means low cost. You're following industry best practices, which are now pretty well documented, and you're adding value on every single transaction. Now, graphically, here's what being world-class looks like. This is some data randomly selected from our benchmarking database. The blue dots here represent data points in our worldwide benchmarking database. On the x-axis here, we're showing cost per ticket. On the y-axis, we're showing quality as measured by customer satisfaction. Now, it's interesting to note that there's clearly a correlation here. It's not just a correlation. It is a cause and effect relationship. And generally, the cause is cost. The effect is quality, meaning that most organizations are constrained by cost, not by quality. That is, you're given a certain budget, you're given certain resources, technology, headcount, office space, etc., and you're told to do the best job you can with those limited resources. So quality is the dependent variable, cost is the independent variable. Now, there are rare circumstances I've seen in my career where the goal is quality and cost is the dependent variable, but in the vast majority of cases, you're given a certain budget, you might have some control over that budget, you might be able to petition for additional resources, but in general, cost is the constraint and quality will be the dependent variable. In other words, quality is driven by the cost and the resources that you have at your disposal. Now, we get asked almost every day by various clients, what does it take to be world-class in desktop support? What cost per ticket? What customer satisfaction? What mean time to resolve for incidents and service requests? What do those metrics look like for a world-class organization? And the answer is, I can't tell you unless I know what kind of resources you have. Because if you are extremely resource constrained, you're not going to be able to achieve the level of performance. Let's say your cost per ticket is $30, which is extremely low for desktop support. You are not going to be able to achieve the same performance that an organization that's spending $200 or $300 or $400 per ticket is able to achieve. So I would expect different levels of performance depending upon the resource constraints that you are operating under. So being world-class is a relative definition. If you're constrained on resources, I wouldn't expect to see the same customer satisfaction. I wouldn't expect to see the same mean times to resolve, the same first visit incident resolution rates as I would in an organization that's spending $200, $300, $400 per ticket. So we've got a cause and effect relationship going on here. Being world-class isn't about hitting absolute values of the metrics that I showed you a couple of pages back. It's about using the limited resources you have in such a way that you deploy them to achieve the best possible benefit. So most organizations operate down here what I'll call the average performance curve. World-class organizations are better, faster, and cheaper. They're cheaper as shown here on the x-axis, cheaper by this amount. They're better, higher quality is shown on the y-axis. Better, faster, cheaper, those are the three elements of competition. Better refers to higher quality. Faster means quicker cycle times. Cheaper means lower cost per ticket. This is what being optimized is all about. This is what being world-class is all about. Now, the second interesting feature about this, in addition to the cause-effect relationship and the correlation you see here, is the fact that the relationship is nonlinear. In other words, quality does not increase at the same rate that cost does. Now, this is known as diminishing returns. It happens with almost every product or service you find, whether you're buying a car, purchasing a seat on an airline to cross the country, purchasing a house. Cost and quality are related. But as quality increases, typically cost increases disproportionately, and that's why the curve starts to flatten out as you move to the right here, because you can always buy more quality, but it becomes more and more and more expensive. Now, one final implication of this is the following. It's helpful to understand where you are on this curve, because if you're way up here in the upper right, you're spending, say, $300 or $400 per ticket, oftentimes there's an opportunity to cut your costs pretty dramatically without impacting quality much at all, because you're way out here on the flat part of the curve. You're at that point of diminishing returns. Now, if you're way down here in the lower right, you're not spending very much and your performance isn't very good, just the opposite is true. You have an opportunity to improve your quality pretty dramatically without increasing your costs very much. So understanding where you are on this cost-quality trade-off is valuable in many cases, because it enables you to make strategic decisions about where you want to operate on this curve and whether or not it may make sense to reduce resourcing levels without impacting quality much at all, or alternatively provide additional resources which will drive a much, much higher level of quality. In a nutshell, this particular chart is what I'll be discussing at Fusion next Monday, is this cost-quality trade-off. And I'll specifically address the issue of how do you define where you're going to operate on this curve. When is it appropriate to operate down here? When is it appropriate to operate up here? And how do you pinpoint where you are on this curve so that you can fine-tune it? So that will be the topic of my presentation next week at Fusion in Washington, D.C. next Monday. That brings us to our first polling question. And that polling question, as you can imagine, has to do with world-class performance. And the polling question is this: do you consider your desktop support function to be world-class? Given the definitions that I've just given you, I provided two definitions. One of them was a graphical representation of world-class performance, and the second one was those four criteria. Remember, high quality, low cost, you're following industry best practices, and you're adding value on every single transaction. So we're getting good participation here. This looks excellent. There are three answers. You can answer yes, you can answer no, or not applicable. If you're not affiliated with a service and support organization, you can answer not applicable. So, do you consider your desktop support to be world-class? While you're answering that, I just want to say hello to some of the people who have joined us today. Let me see if I can open up the attendee list here. We've got quite a list. More than 25 companies represented from all over the world, several hundred people on today's webcast. It's great to have you all here. I'll just call out some names at random. Curtis Moore, thanks for joining us. Gina Pujals, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you for joining us. Ken Kaiser, great to have you here. Robert Lunsford, thanks for joining us. Suzanne Karsvang, thank you for joining our webcast today. Tom Wilcutt, great to have you here. Okay, it looks like almost everybody has weighed in on our polling question. If you haven't voted yet, please do so. What I'm going to do now is close the poll, and I'm going to share those results with you. This is probably the best result we've ever seen. 44% of you, based upon what I've just defined as being a world-class desktop support organization, believe that you're world-class. Kudos to you. It's not an easy thing to do, and this is by far the best result we have ever seen when I ask this question in any of our desktop support presentations. 47% of you are not there yet. For those that aren't there yet, let me just offer some words of encouragement. Becoming world-class really doesn't take that much time, effort, expense, energy, or anything else. You just have to know how to get there. It's one of those situations where if you know what world-class looks like and you know the path to getting there, it's pretty straightforward. And that's what I aim to do today, is paint that picture for you, is light that path for you, so that you understand what you need to do regardless of where you're starting from, whether you're just getting started, whether you're a relatively mature desktop support organization, regardless of what kind of challenges, issues, and problems you may be experiencing. My goal today is to help you understand what a world-class desktop support organization looks like and the path forward for all of you that are interested in achieving that objective. So thank you for participating in that poll. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll down, and we're going to continue on with our discussion of industry best practices. And specifically, at this point, I'm going to introduce our model for industry best practices. It's a four-part model, empirical in nature, as I mentioned earlier. In fact, everything you see and hear today is empirical in nature. This four-part model addresses desktop support strategy, performance measurement and management, human resource management, and what we call marketing, which is not marketing in the traditional sense, but rather managing your message. Now, you'll note here that the four components of the model operate in a continuous fashion. Each of them supports and reinforces the other components of the model. We have arrayed them around the central objective, not of customer satisfaction, which we believe is a losing proposition, but rather customer enthusiasm, which is much better than customer satisfaction. You, of course, want satisfied customers, but what you really want are customers that want to do business with you, customers that are willing to propagate positive word-of-mouth referrals, customers that are loyal to this channel. That's what customer enthusiasm is. It's a very different concept than customer satisfaction, and that's what we're gunning for here. Now, as I mentioned, these four components of the model are self-reinforcing. It's a synergistic model. And one implication is that you don't have to be great or excellent in any of these four areas to have a world-class desktop support function. You really just have to be above average in each of these four areas. I've seen organizations that are doing a great job in 3 out of the 4 areas, but they're weak on strategy, or they're weak on human resource management, or they're weak with their metrics, or they're weak in marketing. They're great in 3 out of 4 areas, but they're weak in one area. They will not achieve world-class performance. You're far better off just exceeding the bar, that is, just being above average in each of the 4 areas. Because of the synergistic nature of this model, if you're just above average in each of these 4 components of our best practices model, you will have a world-class desktop support function. We're going to start our discussion today by looking at strategy, which in a nutshell is all about end-user productivity and total cost of ownership. It's about exploiting the potential, the economic potential of service and support, specifically desktop support. And I'm going to start with an interesting fact, and that is that less than 5% of all IT spending is allocated to end-user support. So when you look at service desk, desktop support, and field support, less than 5% of resources worldwide are spent in these functions on service and support. Now, the other 96% is spent on things like apps development, application maintenance, network operations, mainframe and mid-range computing, desktop computing, and then services like disaster recovery. So the vast majority of service and support is spent elsewhere. Only about 4% of IT dollars are spent on service and support. Now, unfortunately, this leads a lot of people to assume that there's really not much upside opportunity here, and the result is that most organizations manage service and support and the desktop support organization with the goal not of maximizing value, but of minimizing costs. But what we've been able to demonstrate empirically, and I'll show you that data momentarily, is that the most effective strategies focus on maximizing value. And sometimes that means that you make investments in human resources, in technology, in training, in facilities, to exploit the economic potential that exists in IT service and support and remains in most organizations unexploited. Let me show you where that comes from. There are at least three sources of value in IT service and support. One is the ability to minimize and reduce the total cost of ownership in service and support. The second is your ability to make end users more productive. By returning productive hours to those end users, that's a very powerful value proposition. And the third is that service and support is the gateway to IT for the vast majority of end users. And for that reason, service and support has the power to drive a positive view of corporate IT. Let me show you the data behind this. Last year in North America, this is what the cost of resolution, cost per ticket of resolution at various support levels was. Vendor support, that is, you call IBM, Hewlett-Packard, whomever the vendor might be to get resolution. On average, you're looking at about a $500 ticket. If you send your own field support technician out to some location, they jump in a car, a golf cart, they drive or fly somewhere, you're looking at about $200 per ticket. Now, if a ticket is resolved within IT, say an applications group, a networking group, NOC, for example, you're looking at about $85 per ticket. This is North America. This is fully loaded cost per ticket. At desktop support, the number was $62. I showed you that number a little bit earlier when we were looking at some of those metrics from a long time ago. $62 fully loaded cost of resolving a ticket. And the level 1 cost of resolution is $22. Well, this is an interesting graph because what it says is that if we can get things done as low on this hierarchy as possible, we can save ourselves some money. And that's where the concept of shift left came from. So if I take this diagram and I turn it 90 degrees to the right, we get something that looks like this. Okay, level -1 is incident prevention. That is, the user just doesn't have the problem because they've been trained properly or because you've somehow worked that issue, that potential issue, out of the system, either by intelligent design or by effective root cause analysis, for example. So level -1 simply means that the user just doesn't have the problem to begin with. Level 0 is user self-help. You've probably heard this terminology before. And by the way, these amounts here, they reflect what I showed you on the prior page. These are fully loaded cost per ticket of resolving issues at each level. So the service desk, $22 per ticket, fully loaded. Desktop support at $62. If you push it out to IT, what we call N level within IT, you're talking about $85, just under $200 for field support, and vendor support, almost $500. So the concept of shift left, you've heard that a lot. Let's turn a level 1 ticket into a level 0 ticket, or let's turn a level 2 ticket into a level 1 or a level 0 ticket. And in general, I agree with that strategy and that philosophy. However, you need to be careful because if you have, let me just give you an absurd example that I saw actually just yesterday. It was in a pharmaceutical company, and there were research scientists that are paid, in some cases, as much as $200,000 per year. And this pharmaceutical company had developed a really nice search engine and a knowledge base that enabled employees within this company to type in natural language query search, type in what their IT problem was, and find a solution on their own. Well, they did some quick studies with our assistants, and they found that on average, these research scientists were spending about 3 hours a month trying to find their own solutions. Typically, they had 2 incidents per month. And as it turns out, if they had just called the service desk, they probably would have gotten those resolved in 15 minutes per incident, or a total of 30 minutes. So you've got 30 minutes of service desk time with that research scientist in a month versus 3 hours of resolution time when that research scientist is trying to solve the problem on their own. That clearly makes no economic sense. So when you talk about shifting left from level 1 to level 0, it does make sense for things like password resets. It makes sense for really simple things. If there are FAQs that you can put up on your website that provide quick information for your end users that allow them to resolve problems rather than calling for live assistance with an agent at the service desk, that makes sense. But shift left has its limitations. I just gave you one example of what those limitations are. So shift left in general, it's a good concept. I'm illustrating it here, but you need to be careful about what you shift left and how you shift left, because not everything, to be blunt, should be shifted left. Now, in order to make this process work, what you need is a SPOC, a single point of contact, IT support organization. The diagram here shows the user community out on the left. Here you've got your level 1 support, and then you've got what we call, again, N level. You've got desktop support, field support, level 2 within IT. You've got vendor support. Now, in order to make the SPOC, single point of contact, service and support organization work effectively, you need to take an end-to-end view of user support. If you're viewing level 1 and desktop support as separate silos, you're never going to get to Spock. This gives the user a single point of contact for their IT-related incidents, questions, problems, and work requests. And the level 1 service desk is the Spock. This is not a political issue. This is not a turf issue. It's an issue that simply makes sense. You don't want to be intaking problems at desktop support or field services or the vendor or some other level in IT. You want to intake problems at the level 1 service desk. That's where it makes the most sense. Now, level 1 is not responsible for resolving every ticket that comes in, but they are responsible for triaging tickets. They're responsible for resolution at level 1 if possible. They're responsible for effective handoffs to end level, whether it's desktop support, field support, vendor support, or third level within IT. They're responsible for coordination and facilitation of resolution. Again, it doesn't mean that they have to resolve everything. And they're responsible for ticket closure. Now, this doesn't mean that they have to close every ticket, but it does mean that they have to chase tickets. If you push a ticket out to end level, whether it's desktop, field support, vendor support, or level 3 within IT, you need to make sure those tickets get closed within the agreed upon service level. And some of our clients even have personnel whose titles are ticket chaser, meaning that they track tickets down that are getting close to expiration within the service level, and they make sure that the individual or the group, the organization that's responsible for resolving that ticket understands that they need to get that ticket resolved. So although level 1 may not close the ticket, they're responsible for making sure that the ticket gets closed, ideally within the service level agreed upon. Now, in order to make this work effectively, things like drive-bys, flybys, and snags are discouraged. You may have heard these terms before. It's vernacular in the industry. A drive-by, let me give you an example. You've got an individual sitting in their cubicle. They're trying to archive old items in Outlook, or they're trying to turn rows into columns in Excel. They see a desktop support tech. They grab the person, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, call them over and say, hey, can you help me do this? The correct response from that desktop support person should be, contact our service desk. And if they determine that, a desktop support tech needs to be dispatched, then yeah, absolutely. But I'm not the intake point. You need to contact desktop support. They're the ones that are responsible for logging these tickets and then dispatching them if necessary to a desktop support technician. The reason this is important is because of this. You don't want to be resolving tickets at $62 when you can be resolving them at $22. So it's very important, if you're following a Spock model, to try and minimize these and eliminate them as much as possible. I understand if your organization is used to doing this kind of thing, that it's really hard to wean them off of this. I get that. I understand it. And in fact, if you have a lot of this going on and you suddenly put an end to it, you'll take a hit on your customer satisfaction. But your customer satisfaction will recover within typically about 60 to 90 days, and you're going to see a reduction in your costs and an improvement in your overall human resource utilization at level 1 as well as at desktop support. So in order to make the Spock model work, you got to try and minimize these drive-bys, flybys, and snags. Here's some data that shows one of the metrics I introduced earlier, percent resolved level 1 capable. What does it look like when you have a Spock model, single point of contact? What does it look like when you don't have a Spock model? Well, the fuchsia-colored squares here represent the percent resolved level 1 capable when there is no single point of contact model. And the average percent resolved level 1 capable is about 23%. When you have a Spock model, this is from about 150 data points in MetricNet's database. When you have a single point of contact model, what is the percent resolved level 1 capable? Blue diamonds, average 15.3%. You got about an 8 percentage point or 7.5 percentage point difference here between single point of contact versus non-Spock. And if you're talking about a difference of $62 versus $22, that's $40 per ticket. So the difference here, if you're handling, say, just make up a small number, 1,000 tickets per month, this 8.5 percentage point or 7.5 percentage point difference is 75 tickets a month. And if each defect is costing you $40, do the math. 75 tickets times $40. Might not sound like a lot, but when you get into bigger organizations that are handling 5, 10, 20, 50,000 tickets per month, it's a huge number. Spock helps you minimize total cost of ownership. Okay, second source of value is your ability to return productive hours to end users. That's what we're showing on this chart here. Now, there were 60 organizations that participated in this research with MetricNet. We divided them into quartiles. Here's the data from quartile 1, data from quartile 2, data from quartile 3, and data from quartile 4. Now, how did we determine these quartiles? Well, we had each of these 60 companies participate in a MetricNet service desk and desktop support benchmark. And based upon their scores in customer satisfaction, FCR, first contact resolution rate, and mean time to resolve, we were able to organize them into these performance quartiles. Furthermore, we did a time and motion study, a traditional industrial engineering study at each of these 60 organizations, and we outfitted a cross-section of their end users with stopwatches that they could use whenever they had an IT-related problem or issue. And we asked them to keep track of the amount of productive time that they lost when they had those IT-related problems and issues. Now, there was some estimation that goes on here because, as you know, when there is some issue with your laptop, your tablet, your phone, whatever it might be, you're generally not completely, it doesn't halt work completely. Generally, there's a workaround. There are things that you can continue to do while you're waiting for your device, software to get fixed. But here's the interesting conclusion. If you're lucky enough to work in one of these service and support organizations that is a top quartile service and support organization, you're going to lose about 17 productive hours per year. Now, the average end user has 3 devices now. Those devices might be a smartphone, it might be a tablet computer, it might be a desktop computer, a laptop computer. It could even be a printer or a server. Some of our clients, believe it or not, now have printers and servers in their offices. But on average, if you're lucky enough to work in a top quartile performing service and support organization, you're going to lose about 17 productive hours a year. By contrast, if you're unlucky enough to work in an organization that is 4th quartile, meaning that they performed in the lowest quartile of service and support for both service desk and desktop support, you're losing about 47 productive hours per year in productivity. So the difference here is a stunning 30 hours. You know, difference between a top quartile organization and a bottom quartile organization, 30 hours per individual per year. That is almost a full week. Think about it. If you have a company with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees, and you multiply that 30 hours by the number of employees, and you're losing a huge amount of productivity if IT service and support falls in the 4th quartile. So this is the biggest source of economic value that is generated by IT service and support. Your ability to return productive hours to end users. The better you perform, the quicker your cycle times are, the higher your first contact resolution rates are, and the less productive hours your end users will lose. So this by far is the biggest source of economic value that is generated and created by IT service and support. If you're a top performing organization, this data set right here, you can see the hours lost over here, the y-axis, productive hours lost per employee per year, averages 17.1 in quartile 1, averages 25.9 in quartile 2, averages 37.4 in quartile 3, and it averages about 47 hours in quartile 4. This is huge. Most organizations don't understand this. They believe that IT service and support is a keep the lights on function. In some cases, we've had clients refer to it as a necessary evil. But the reality is, if you recognize this value and you're willing to make investments that exploit this value, you can create a hugely positive return on investment in IT service and support. Now, the third primary source of value that is created in IT service and support is your ability to drive a positive opinion of corporate IT. In this particular study, MetricNet surveyed over 1,000 organizations worldwide. They were mostly large cap companies, companies that you would recognize if you saw their names. Just look at the Global 2000 and take half of them, and they were in this study. It was a multiple choice survey, and we essentially asked the individuals in these companies, what drove your view of corporate IT? We didn't ask them about service support, but we did give them about 25 different choices, which is why if you add these numbers up, you get to a figure that's greater than 100%. We told them pick your top 3 answers. What drives your view of corporate IT? The number 1 answer was the service desk. 84% answered the service desk drives my view of corporate IT. 47% answered desktop support. Now, initially, we were shocked by this, as were the participants in this research were shocked by this. But it makes sense if you think about it, because your average end user doesn't spend a lot of time interacting with IT. They don't hang out with the people in the data center. They don't hang out with the application developers, although they might. But in general, their interactions with IT are through service and support. They're with the service desk. They're with desktop support. So naturally, if they have a good experience there, they're going to think good things about all of IT. They're going to transfer that experience and project it onto the rest of IT. Regardless of how the data center is doing and the applications is doing and the NOC is doing, they're going to project their good feelings and their goodwill from service and support onto the rest of IT. By contrast, if they have a poor experience at service and support, if the problem doesn't get resolved, if the ticket gets lost, if the resolution time is excessive, they're going to have just the opposite experience. They're going to have a bad experience with service and support, and they're going to project that onto the rest of IT. Now, a couple of years ago, I wrote an article for CIO Magazine called the CIO Service and Support Imperative that essentially argued the point that if you understand this data as a CIO or a Chief Technology Officer, you have no choice but to make investments that are appropriate in service and support, not just in headcount and technology and amenities and training and so on, but your personal time and attention. You ought to be spending, if you can't get there physically, at least schedule a 1 hour per week call with service and support, with desktop support and with the service desk. Let them know you care, figure out what they need, and fund them appropriately, because this is a proxy. Service and support is a proxy for all of IT. And if that's true, it is also a proxy for your performance, Mr. or Ms. CIO, Mr. or Ms. Chief Technology Officer. Service and support is a proxy for how good a job you're doing. So if you want to look good, make the necessary investments in IT service and support to ensure that customers have a quality experience every time they call the service desk, every time they interact with desktop support. This drives the end user's perception of IT. Let's shift gears now and talk specifically about key performance indicators. Now, this is a fairly meaty section of today's presentation. The reason it is so important is twofold. Number one, there's roughly a 1-to-1 correlation between support organizations that have a mature metrics, performance measurement, and management discipline, and support organizations that are world-class. And secondly, this is typically the weakest area we find in most service and support organizations. They might be good understanding their, the strategic leverage, the strategy piece we just looked at. They might be good with technology and human resources. They might be good with messaging. But this is the area of greatest weakness that we find in organizations. They either don't track the right metrics, or they track too many metrics, or they don't track enough metrics. But most importantly, they don't use the metrics effectively. See, performance indicators are interesting, but by themselves, they don't do anything for you unless you're willing to use them diagnostically and prescriptively, which means that you use the metrics to inform you about your strengths and weaknesses, and then you do something as a result of that. You see, metrics, unless they drive some kind of action that leads to an improvement in performance over time, are kind of worthless. They're interesting, but they don't do much for you. And so that's the biggest missed opportunity we see in many organizations, is that they don't have a mature metrics function. They use them merely to track and trend performance without realizing and exploiting the diagnostic capabilities of metrics. So we're going to spend the next 15 or so minutes talking specifically about how you can use metrics holistically, prescriptively, and diagnostically to build a competitive advantage in desktop support. Now, what I'm showing here on page 29 are 30 desktop support metrics. These are the most common, but I don't want to lead you to believe that they are the only metrics. There are literally hundreds of KPIs that I've seen in desktop support. Now, we've organized these into 7 categories. We've got cost metrics. We've got service level metrics. We've got ticket handling metrics, things like average incident work time. We've got quality metrics, technician metrics, productivity metrics, and workload metrics. These are the metrics we include in a typical MetricNet desktop support benchmark. But again, this is not all-inclusive. As I mentioned, there are literally hundreds of metrics. But I want to give you a slightly different way of thinking about and categorizing these metrics. Specifically, we've created this conceptual diagram that organizes metrics into 3 categories. We've got macro measures, which tell a story. We've got the underlying drivers of those macro measures. These are the things you have control over. And then we've got causal factors, which you don't have any control over but drive the workload. So cost and quality are the macro measures, things like cost per ticket and customer satisfaction. They tell the story of your performance, and they're pretty good for communicating, how desktop support is doing. But you can't impact them directly. If I go into an organization and I'm told, hey, our cost per ticket is high and our customer satisfaction is low, I can't just go out there and tweak cost or customer satisfaction. But what I do have control over are these underlying metrics, the productivity metrics, the service level metrics, the technician and ticket handling metrics. These are the underlying drivers of the macro measures. You have control over these metrics, and it's through these metrics that you can influence the macro measures and over time improve your performance. Now, the metrics that are outside your control are what we call workload metrics. These are driven by causal factors. these will define the volume and the mix of work that is, given to you or that you're expected to perform in desktop support. You don't have much control over these. They are a function typically of your IT environment. Now, I want to expand on this concept because there's a couple of subordinate concepts that I want to emphasize here as well. Your causal factors, what drives your workload? Well, things like the number of devices. Does your organization have 2 devices per end user or 5 devices per end user? That's going to make a huge difference. Your mix of desktop and laptop computers. We know for a fact that laptop computers require more care and feeding than desktop computers. How many mobile devices are you supporting? How old are these devices and how often are they refreshed? How standardized is your environment? How virtualized is your environment? What's the population density? This is a big one. If I've got desktop support technicians working in a high-rise building, they can get to and from a ticket in 5 or 10 minutes maybe. If you're in an environment, say, spread out like a military base as an example or a big government installation, you can have travel times of an hour or more per ticket. That will make a big, big difference in your workload because every ticket might take 3 hours to resolve, whereas in a high-density environment, it might only take 30 minutes to resolve. The work location of your users, are they working from home, in an office, are they out in the field? Numerous factors are going to drive the workload. Now, here's one important implication. I mentioned the subordinate implication. We get calls, I mentioned this earlier, we get calls frequently from clients who say, hey, I've got 5,000 end users, how many desktop support techs do I need? Is the ratio 1 tech for every 250 users? Is the ratio 1 tech for every 1,000 users? Is the ratio 1 tech for every 100 users? What's the right ratio? The answer is you're asking the wrong question. What matters is the workload and the density of the end user environment. The workload is the workload. It's going to be driven by these factors, like the number of devices your users have, how new those devices are and whether or not they've been refreshed recently, number of mobile devices, how standardized. All of these things are going to drive the workload. And then the travel time, how dispersed your end users are going to drive the travel time. So you're asking the wrong question if you say, what's the right ratio? It's absolutely a fallacious question because it assumes, the premise is that there is some fixed ratio of desktop support technicians for every 1,000 end users, and that is just false, false, false. What matters is the workload. We've seen environments where literally one desktop support technician can support 2,500 end users. We have also seen environments where one desktop support technician is required for every 50 users. So the ratio of techs to end users is a non-issue. Don't even think about that ratio. It will lead you down the wrong path. What you need to be thinking about is workload. Look at the tickets generated. Look at the density of your end user population. Look at the mix of incidents and service requests. Those are the things that make up workload. And your staffing should be based on workload, not end user population. Okay. So we've all heard this expression before when it comes to KPIs. If you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. There are variations on this theme, like what gets measured gets treasured. There is a lot more to the story, though, and specifically what we've seen historically, and I've alluded to this already, is that a lot gets measured in IT service and support. But historically, not much is done with those measurements. In other words, there's very little analysis typically that goes on with those measurements, and for that reason, there's not a whole lot of action planning, and the result is that if you look at the action that results from all these measures, it's usually non-existent or not enough to be significant. But the value increases as you move up this pyramid. That's what this red arrow says. And so the holistic approach, which we've seen emerge in the last 3 to 5 years, both at level 1 and in desktop support, takes this pyramid and turns it upside down, and it says, you know what? We don't need 30 KPIs to effectively manage our desktop support organization, but what we do need is a small number of measures that are well-defined and doggedly tracked. And then what we need to do is make sure we evaluate those metrics effectively, understand what their cause and effect relationships are. Then we can develop action plans. We can come up with specific steps that we can take that allow us to contain our cost or reduce our cost or allow us to improve the quality of the customer experience. But then we need to be action-oriented. We got to do something that's based on this, otherwise it's all just a big waste of time. So this holistic approach to performance measurement and management is the one that we espouse at MetricNet. This is the one that drives the greatest value. So when we look at this long list of KPIs, 30-plus metrics shown on page 34, I'm going to suggest to you that the 80-20 rule really applies when it comes to desktop support key performance indicators. There are 8 metrics here on page 35. One of those metrics is what we call an aggregate metric. It combines the other 7 metrics into a single metric, and I'll explain how that's done. But we start with what we call the foundation metrics, which are cost and customer satisfaction. We call those foundation metrics because ultimately everything you do in service and support boils down to one of two things. You're trying to contain or reduce your costs, or you're trying to drive a higher quality customer experience as measured by customer satisfaction. It may sound draconian to say that nothing else matters, but the truth is nothing else does matter. And that really greatly simplifies management decision-making in a service and support environment. Whether you're at level 1 or desktop support, any decision should be viewed through this lens. Whether it's a headcount decision, a technology decision, a process decision, whatever it might be, ask yourself this question. In the long run, will this increase in headcount, decrease in headcount? Will this new technology? Will this change process? Will this training, in the long run, either contain or reduce our costs, or will they improve the quality of the customer experience? If the answer is not yes to at least one of those questions, you just don't do it. It's as simple as that. Everything boils down to cost and quality. And if your actions don't lead to in the long term to either a reduction in cost or an improvement in the quality of the customer experience, you're wasting your time. It's as simple as that. But that does greatly, viewed through that lens, it greatly simplifies management decision-making in service and support. However, as I mentioned earlier, you can't directly control cost and customer satisfaction, but you do have control over technician utilization. This is a labor-intensive function, and utilization is what drives your cost per contact. First contact resolution rate for incidents and mean time to resolve are your two big drivers of customer satisfaction. You do have control over these metrics. These are the levers you can pull to achieve a better outcome in customer satisfaction. This is the lever you can pull to achieve a better outcome in cost per ticket. Then we've got our total cost of ownership metric. I've introduced this already, the percentage of tickets resolved that are level 1 capable, percent resolved that could have and should have been resolved at level 1. Technician job satisfaction we include because it has a secondary effect on almost every metric in service and support. And then finally, the balanced scorecard. Let me show you how the scorecard is constructed. In this example, we've got 8 metrics in our balanced scorecard. You're welcome to change this up, delete some, add more. We don't care. The key thing you're trying to do here is roll together a disparate set of metrics. Some have units of dollars, some have units of percent, some have units of days. And what we're doing here is we're normalizing them, aggregating them, and we're coming up with a single score that ranges from 0 to 100%. Now the process here is you start by picking the metrics for your scorecard. You know, smaller is better. You weight each metric according to its relative importance, and you can see that we've overweighted cost and customer satisfaction. The foundation metrics collectively represent 55% of our weighting here. And then for a peer group that is comparable to your desktop support organization, and I'll elaborate on that later, but a peer group that's comparable, you show the worst case performer and you show the best case performer in the 4th column from the left here. Then you put your actual performance in the 3rd column from the right, and you calculate a metric score using this interpolation formula. Here's how this formula works. You take the worst case in your benchmarking peer group and you subtract your actual performance. That becomes the numerator of our ratio. The denominator of the ratio is the range, which is the worst case minus the best case. Now when you run this calculation, you're going to end up with a series of metric scores that range from 0% to 100%. The high scores, closer to 100%, indicate that you're performing very well. It means that you are much closer to the best case scenario than you are to the worst case scenario. Your lower scores, lowest score on this scorecard right here, is technician utilization at 59%. It is closer to the worst case scenario than it is to the best case scenario. So your metric scores will range between 0 and 100%. If you're at 100%, it says you have the best performance in the peer group. If you're at 0%, it says that you have the worst performance in the peer group. Final step in the construction of the scorecard is to multiply the metric score by the metric weighting to come up with a balanced score for each of the metrics in the scorecard. When you add those together, you're going to come up with a score that ranges from 0 to 100%. Now, a lot of people look at this and say, well, you know, 67.1, that doesn't sound like a great score. The reality is when we run hundreds of service desks through this algorithm, the average score is about 50%. Typically, if you're above 60%, you're in the top quartile. And you're in the 2nd quartile if you're between 50 and 60%, 3rd quartile 40 to 50%, 4th quartile below 40%. It is a bell-shaped curve. It is a normal distribution centered right above 50%. The beauty of that is that it levels the playing field and enables you to compare your aggregate performance to others in your benchmarking peer group. So here we've got 67.1%, the number we just calculated here. The peer group shown on this particular chart, about 100 desktop support organizations, had an average score of 51.9%. High score was about 86%. That's this desktop support organization over here. The low score was 16%, way over here in the lower right. The dashed line that runs through this chart represents the peer group average of 51.9%. So the scorecard is a way of normalizing and aggregating this disparate set of metrics. Think about it. I mean, you've got a lot of different metrics moving in a lot of different directions, month in, month out, quarter in, quarter out, year in, year out. And sometimes it's hard to answer the question, are we better off this month or this quarter or this year than we were last month, last quarter, last year? The balanced scorecard answers that question for you, because if you track and update your performance on a quarterly or monthly basis, which is what one of our clients did here, you can see over time that if the number's going up, that's a good thing, because it says that you've aggregated your cost metrics, your quality metrics, your productivity metrics, your service level metrics, and your ticket handling metrics, and you roll them into a single overall measure of performance. And if that number is going up over time, as I've shown here on this chart, your performance is improving over time. You wouldn't expect it to go up every single month, which is why we've got some ups and downs on this chart. By the way, the purple background here represents the trailing 12-month average. So the scorecard is a very elegant way of answering that question. How are we trending? How are we doing this month relative to last month? How do we compare to others in our industry? And what does the overall trend look like? Okay, now, we've talked about one metric. That's the aggregate metric. We're going to talk about the other 7, and the vehicle that we're going to use to talk about those other 7 metrics is a benchmarking case study. Now, many of you are probably familiar with benchmarks. In fact, I know that many of you have actually done a benchmark with MetricNet. So this will be, good rehearsal for you, or good review for you, if you will. But basically, benchmarking involves comparing the performance of your desktop support organization to the performance of a peer group. You compare metrics like cost per ticket and customer satisfaction, mean time to resolve, and the like. The comparison by itself is interesting, but as I've mentioned numerous times now, isn't very useful. What is valuable about benchmarking is that when there is a peer in your benchmarking group that is outperforming you in one or more metrics, you want to understand what they're doing, because if you understand what they're doing, you can selectively emulate them. You can adopt and adapt what they're doing into your own organization. That's the very essence of benchmarking, is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to figure it out through trial and error. You don't have to improve incrementally, with all the blood, sweat, and tears that goes along with evolutionary improvement. Benchmarking enables you to build upon the industry's proven best practices and achieve world-class performance, not at an evolutionary pace, but at a revolutionary pace. That's the real power of benchmarking, is that it allows you to leapfrog ahead of all the trial and error, all the incremental improvement, and improve your performance at a revolutionary pace. Now, earlier I presented this chart in the context of what does it mean to be world-class. I'm presenting the same chart without the data points, but still bounded on the top by the best-in-class performance curve, bounded on the bottom by the average performance curve. I'm presenting this now for a different purpose, and I'm trying to show what benchmarking does for an organization. If you start out here, you're on the average performance curve. Benchmarking allows you to do things better and faster and cheaper. It allows you to identify inefficiencies that can reduce your costs, and it allows you to identify opportunities to improve your performance. It's not about spending more money. It's not about stripping resources out of the organization. It's about optimization. That's what optimization means, is you take the resources you've got and you deploy them in such a way that you get a better result. That's what benchmarking does for an organization. That brings us to our second and third polling questions of the day. And as you can imagine, those polling questions are, in fact, about benchmarking. And the second polling question, of the day is this: have you benchmarked desktop support within the past year? And again, I'll just call out a few names while you're doing that. We're always grateful to have so many people from so many different time zones around the world participating in our benchmarks. I always like to just a special word of thanks to all of you, particularly if it's middle of the night your time, Australia, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, you know who I'm talking about. Bob Gribben, thanks for joining us. Brian Foote, great to have you here. Emily Daly, great to see you. Nick Derigi, I hope I pronounced that right. Good to have you here. Randall York, great to have you. And again, I'm just calling these out at random. Tara McCaw, so glad you could join us today. Tom Blankenship, great to have you. Vicki Parsons, good to have you here. Okay, it looks like almost 90% of you have weighed in on this question. If you haven't, please answer the polling question. Have you benchmarked desktop support within the past year? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll down, and then I'm going to share the results with you. Now, 28% of you have benchmarked desktop support within the past year. 61% of you have not benchmarked. For those that have benchmarked, kudos to you, because one of the things we've observed is that just as there is a one-to-one correlation between a mature metrics discipline and organizations who operate world-class service and support functions, there is a one-to-one correlation between organizations that benchmark annually and organizations that perform at a world-class level. So for those who are already doing it, kudos to you. For those who haven't benchmarked within the past year, I would strongly ask you to consider doing that. Benchmarking is the quickest, most effective, most efficient tool to elevate your performance from its current level, however good or bad that might be, to a defined, objective, world-class level of performance. So I'm going to close that poll down, and I'm going to open up our last poll of the day, and that last poll is, do you plan to benchmark desktop support in the future? So follow-on question to the last one. The last one said, have you benchmarked desktop support within the past year? Do you plan to benchmark desktop support in the future? Okay, we're getting lots of participation here. We're past 50% already, which means we have several hundred responses already. I would invite you, if you haven't answered this poll, please answer it, and I'll close it down in a moment and show you what those results look like. 5 possible responses: yes, within the next 90 days, yes, within the next 6 months, yes, within the next hour, no plans to benchmark at this time, or, as the case might be, not applicable. Okay. We've got more than 90%. That's a great showing. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll down. If you want to vote, please do it right now. Poll's now closed, and here are the results. Almost a fourth of you, 23%, are planning to benchmark within the next 90 days. This is consistent with what we observe in this industry, is that many organizations have a goal to benchmark within a given year, and sometimes organizations get to it in the fourth quarter. So for those of you who are planning to benchmark within the next 90 days, my guess is that a significant number of you have a goal to get a benchmark done this year. Another 16% are planning to benchmark within the next 6 months, 24% within the next year, 19% no plans, and 19% not applicable. Now recall on the prior page, about 25% of the organizations have benchmarked within the past year. 19% have no plans to benchmark at this time. So I'm guessing there's a pretty large overlap between those who have already benchmarked recently and those that don't have any plan to benchmark at this time. But for the rest of you, let's see, 23% plus 16% is 39%, plus another 24% is going to get us to 63%. Almost 2/3 of you are planning to benchmark your desktop support within the next year. I want to offer, again, some words of encouragement. If you're planning to benchmark, I would encourage you to go through with that process. One of the things you'll find is that it's not terribly time-consuming. It's not terribly resource-intensive. Doesn't cost a lot of money. Doesn't take a lot of time. But it is one of the most effective things you can do to elevate your performance from its current level, again, however good or bad that might be, to a world-class, demonstrable world-class level of performance. So for those that are thinking about doing it here over the next 90 days, 6 months, or 1 year, I encourage you to go through with those plans. Okay, we're going to move on now, and I'm going to introduce some benchmarking data to you here on page 44. However, I want to caution you against using this data to benchmark your own desktop support organization, because one of the success factors in benchmarking is that you need a peer group that looks like you. That is, the desktop support organizations that you benchmark against need to be comparable to you in the scope of services, the scale of services, the complexity, and the geography. So this is real benchmarking data, but you need to be careful about comparing your own performance to this, because it's unlikely to be the appropriate peer group. Now, I'm just going to look at a couple of metrics here. I'm going to look at the cost metrics, and I'm going to look at the customer satisfaction metric. Costs are high. We're at $81 a ticket versus $68 for the peer group. We're at $57 per incident versus $45 per incident for the peer group. $144 for a service request, $128 versus the peer group. So we've got high costs here. Secondly, our customer satisfaction is 71%. The peer group's at 81%. This peer group, by the way, can't remember exactly the number. I think it was almost 50 desktop support organizations in this peer group. So we got big problems. We've got high cost, low quality. We need to figure out what's going on, and we're going to use this as a foil for discussing the remaining KPIs on the short list, starting with cost per ticket, customer satisfaction, the 2 foundation metrics. Think of them on a 2-dimensional chart like this. On the x-axis, we have cost per ticket. The y-axis, we have customer satisfaction. We've got lower cost on the right, Higher cost on the left, somewhat counterintuitive. As you move to the right, it's lower cost. The y-axis is as you would normally expect it to be. As you move up the y-axis, you get higher customer satisfaction. Now, where you want to be on this chart is in the upper right-hand quadrant. This is the quadrant where you are both efficient and effective, meaning low cost, high quality. If you're in the lower right-hand quadrant, you're low cost, that's good, but it also means you're low quality, and you need to improve your quality over time. If you're in the upper left-hand quadrant, your quality is good, but your costs are high, and over time you need to figure out how to reduce your costs and get into the upper right-hand quadrant. If you're in the lower left quadrant, you've got the worst of everything. You've got high costs and low quality. You need to be thinking about, how do I improve quality? How do I reduce costs over time so that I can work my way into this upper right-hand quadrant? Again, this is the yin and yang of service and support. Cost and customer satisfaction are in dynamic tension. That's not a bad thing. Customer satisfaction, as you increase that, typically you increase your cost. Cost per contact, as you reduce that, typically you sacrifice something on quality. The trick is to find the appropriate balance, the appropriate point of minimum tension between those two competing objectives. Let's look at the underlying drivers of those. Specifically, let's look at what drives cost per ticket. This is a labor-intensive function. More than 2/3 of your costs are your human resources, your agents, your supervisors, your team leads, your workforce schedulers. Their salaries and benefits make up almost 70% of the total cost of desktop support. And so naturally, human resource productivity is going to have a big impact on your cost per ticket, and it's one of the levers that you can exercise to ensure that your cost per ticket doesn't get out of hand. Here's the data. The blue diamonds are data points. The red line is a linear regression through the data. You can see that as technician utilization increases, cost per ticket goes down. No surprise there. If you're using your human resources more efficiently, you would expect your cost per ticket to go down. Here's how we define utilization. We look at the number of incidents that tech handles in a month, multiply that by the incident handle time, add to that the number of service requests that tech handles in a month, multiply that by the service request work time, then we add the travel time. Number of tickets handled by a tech in a month, multiplied by the travel time. Here's an example of how that works out when the number of incidents per tech per month is 60, 24 service requests per month, work time per, or number of tickets per technician per month is 24, incident work time is 32 minutes, service request work time is 59 minutes, and the travel time per ticket is 41 minutes. So if you plug all those into the formula on the prior page, you end up with a utilization of about 70%, which is fairly high. Generally, in the industry, the utilization for techs in desktop support is about 55 to 60%. People look at that and think, well, what are they doing the rest of the time? Are they goofing off? Are they being lazy? The answer is no. We don't back out sick days, vacation days, holidays. We don't back out administrative time. We don't back out training time. And there's a certain amount of time, it does happen from time to time, when there are no tickets to be handled. And so there's idle time. We don't back any of that stuff out. And the reason we do it that way is that we measure everyone in our benchmarking database exactly the same way. That way we know that when we compare two desktop support organizations and look at their utilization, that we're using the same rules, the same formula for every organization in our benchmarking database. Let's turn our attention now to customer satisfaction and the key drivers of CSAT. They are technician job satisfaction, first contact resolution rate for incidents, and the mean times to resolve on your service levels. Here's technician job satisfaction. As that number goes up, so too does customer satisfaction. Blue diamonds are data points. Red line is a linear regression. First contact resolution rate on incidents. As that number goes up, so too does customer satisfaction. Again, blue diamonds are data points. Red line is a linear regression. The mean time to resolve for incidents. This is in work days. As that number increases, you would expect customer satisfaction to go down, and that's in fact what happens. So let's look now at training hours and what impact they have on technician job satisfaction and first contact resolution rate. New technician training hours, as that number increases, technician job satisfaction goes up. That's not surprising. Technicians want to know that you care about them and you're willing to invest in them. And as you increase training hours, both for new technicians and for seasoned technicians, we see technician satisfaction increase. Let's look at annual training hours. These blue diamonds here on the y-axis are desktop support organizations that don't provide any ongoing training for their technicians. But as you move out here to the right, you can see that some organizations provide as much as 100 or even 120 hours of ongoing training per year to their technicians. As that number improves, so too does technician job satisfaction. Finally, if we look at time on job, this is a measure of experience. How many months have these technicians been on the job? It ranges from about 10 to 5 years, 60 months. Again, blue diamonds are data points. Red line is a linear regression. The incident first contact resolution rate goes up the more experienced your agents become. That's not a surprise. You get better at things. if you work at them for 30 months versus 10 months, if you work at them for 60 months versus 30 months. You get better at things. And so first contact resolution rate improves with technician time on job, or tenure as we call it. And that's a good thing because we know that FCR drives customer satisfaction. So finally, we've got our build. We start with the two foundation metrics. They are driven respectively by technician utilization and FCR. Those are driven by a tertiary set of metrics, including the service levels. And then we have technician job satisfaction, and finally we have the drivers of technician satisfaction, which are coaching, career pathing, and training hours. Okay, the whole point of that digression, if you want to call it that, is that we need to diagnose what's going on here with this high cost and this low customer satisfaction. Okay, what drives high cost? Well, in this particular case, if we look at utilization, remember, big driver of cost, utilization, under biggest driver of cost. We look at technician utilization, and it's only 46% versus 54% for the benchmarking peer group. To make a long story short, the simple fact was this organization was overstaffed. They just had too many technicians. And if we look at another productivity metric called the ratio of technicians to total headcount, we can see that they were top-heavy too. So you want this number to be up in the 80% range. You can see the peer group, technicians divided by total headcount in desktop support is 84%. This particular company was only at 73%. So not only did they have too many technicians, which hurt their utilization, they were top-heavy. They had too many indirect personnel, too many supervisors, team leads, workforce schedulers, QA/QC people, and the like. So the short diagnosis here was that you're simply overstaffed. But it went a little bit deeper than that. And the rest of the story I'll fold into the discussion of customer satisfaction, which was also low, 71%, 10 percentage points lower than the benchmarking peer group. What are the big drivers of customer satisfaction? Well, FCR and technician job satisfaction. Let's look at first contact resolution rate, ticket handling. Here it is, 49% FCR versus 55% for the benchmarking peer group. If we look at the experience level of these technicians, technician tenure, 11 months versus 47 months for the peer group. The training hours they get, only 10 hours versus 46 hours of new training. No ongoing training versus 21 hours for the peer group. Technician job satisfaction was low. Here's what was happening. This organization was paying their starting techs $35,000 per year in a geographic area where the average starting salary for desktop technicians was almost $49,000 per year. So when you pay that, and I alluded to this very early on one of the early slides, you're not going to attract the most qualified individuals. What they were getting were individuals with virtually no experience. Then they were not giving them much training at all. As a result, the first contact resolution rate was not very good. They were overstaffed. Their service levels were not good. You can look at service levels, response time for average incident response time, 9.1 hours, percent of incidents resolved in 24 hours, 33% versus 51%. The problem is their whole human resource strategy was wrong. They weren't hiring qualified people, and they weren't training them effectively. So the diagnosis here was that you need to get more qualified resources. Now, the good news about 50% turnover, they were at 53% turnover, is that you can attrit pretty quickly, meaning that as your technicians leave for whatever reason, you can bring in new people that are more experienced, more qualified, better educated, who've done this job before, and you can train them effectively and get a better result. It took them almost a year, but they did get their costs, despite the fact that they were paying more to their technicians, they got their costs below the peer group average because their utilization improved, and they were able to improve their customer satisfaction to almost 85%. Again, it took them about a year to do this, but they improved customer satisfaction to almost 85%, largely as a result of improving their first contact resolution rate. That number got to almost 70%. They were in the high 60s compared to 55% for the peer group. Here's what I want you to take away from this exercise is the fact that understanding the cause and effect relationship between the KPIs, understanding the linkage of these KPIs is enormously powerful because it gives you the tools you need to achieve desired outcomes. If you want to improve your cost per ticket, look first at utilization, then look at your service levels. If you want to improve your customer satisfaction, look at your technician satisfaction, your first contact res rate for incidents, and your service levels. Understanding this linkage, this interconnectedness, if you will, is enormously powerful, and it is the key to diagnosis in desktop support, is the key to effective diagnosis and determining what the next steps are to improve your performance in desktop support. Running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to skip the Q&A. I will, however, at the conclusion of our webcast today, answer any questions that have been typed in. So don't be shy about typing questions into the dialog box. I will get to those at the conclusion of our webcast. We're going to turn our attention now to human resource management. And what I'm showing on page 63 is a little bit of a cheat sheet where we've listed some of the more common best practices in human resource management. I've listed them in shorthand in the left column. I've described them in a bit more detail in the second column from the left. I give you a simple one like career pathing. Career paths have been formalized and documented. They often include vertical, meaning managerial, as well as lateral, meaning technical promotion opportunities. Performance levels required for advancement are clearly spelled out. Agents are encouraged to take charge of their own career and skills development. Okay, that's a success factor in human resource management. Again, I've not listed all of them. There are about 14 success factors in human resource management, but I've used this to illustrate a point. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see what I call affected KPIs, things like cost per ticket, customer satisfaction, technician utilization, first contact res rate, and the like. And at the intersection of these affected KPIs and these best practices, you're going to find a cell. That cell will either be white, light blue, or dark blue. If the cell is white, it means that the best practice has little or no effect on the KPI. If it's light blue, it means that the best practice has a minor effect on the affected KPI. If it's dark blue, it means that there's a strong cause and effect relationship between the best practice and the KPI. So if you've got a gap in first contact resolution rate, training, and this kind of makes common sense if you think about it, training is one way that you can close that gap. If you've got a gap in mean time to resolve, one way that you can improve that is to establish performance standards. There's some weak cause-effect relationship there, but the big driver of your mean time to resolve, again, is better training. So this cheat sheet gives you insight into which best practices in human resources drive which KPIs and how you can close gaps in any of these affected KPIs that you identify. Now, just like the scorecard that I showed you earlier is for the aggregate desktop support function, it is possible to repurpose that scorecard for individual technicians that work in desktop support, and most of our clients are now doing this. You will see some common metrics between this and the overall desktop support scorecard. However, this is a unique scorecard, and again, it's meant to be used at an individual level. You look at customer satisfaction for the technician, you look at first contact res rate for incidents, you look at a productivity metric, how many incidents did they close, how many service requests did they close, what was the unplanned absenteeism, and then we've got some subjective metrics like teamwork and initiative and mentoring. Now, you can see the weights we put on those metrics. Mechanically, this scorecard works exactly like the scorecard I presented earlier. We show for this particular desktop support group what was the worst case performance in the group, what was the best case performance in the group for this month or quarter, whatever the period that you're evaluating. And then you show for this technician what is their performance. And then you can go and calculate a metric score just like we did earlier. It's an interpolation formula. And by the way, these subjective factors like teamwork and initiative and mentoring are put on a scale of 0 to 5. 0 means you're not doing it or not doing it at all. A 5 means that you're really good at it. So you can objectify something that is very subjective, and that's what we've done here by putting this on a scale of 1 to 5. So you calculate the metric scores. A 100% score means that you've got the best score in the benchmarking peer group. A lower score means that you're not doing so well in that area. And just like we did with the overall desktop support scorecard, you multiply the metric score by the metric weighting, you add all those numbers up, and you come up with an aggregate score for that individual for the month, for the week, it's generally done monthly, or for the quarter as an example. Now, many of our clients go even further, and they will post the scores on a monthly basis. Now, they're not doing this to embarrass anybody. You don't put any names in here. You identify individuals with a number so that, again, you don't want to embarrass people, but I think it's extremely valuable, as do most of our clients, for them to understand, each technician understand how they rank amongst their peers. Are they the top performer for the month? Are they the bottom performer for the month? How do they compare to the average for the month? And what is their scorecard trend over the last several months? This is enormously motivating in two directions. For those that want to do a good job and want to improve their performance, they're going to work harder to move up this ladder. For those that just can't seem to get ahead and they're consistently down here in the bottom quartile, well, maybe they're in the wrong job. Maybe this isn't suited for them, and maybe they need to reconsider what they want to be doing for work. and some of them will self-attrit out, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So this scorecard provides an objective way for a supervisor or a manager in desktop support to deliver very specific, very objective feedback to an individual. This metric score tells these individuals where they need to focus their time and attention. This particular person is doing great on initiative. They're doing a good job as well on mentoring. They could probably improve in teamwork. They could probably improve over here in the service requests. Volume of service requests closed 28.5 isn't a great number, so their productivity is a little bit low. This is a very targeted tool, very objective tool, and it simplifies the discussion that needs to be had periodically with technicians that work in desktop support and gives them very specific feedback. Now, there's kind of a myth in this industry that job satisfaction is just going to be low, and it is low. If we go back and look at the benchmarking data, let's see what it was for this particular peer group. Technician satisfaction, okay, it's actually not bad for this peer group. Normally, it's quite a bit lower than that. Low job satisfaction and low morale is epidemic in IT service and support. And there's a myth or a belief by a lot of people that there's nothing you can do about it. It just happens, and it just happens to be not very good. But the reality is you have a significant control over technician job satisfaction. You can influence it with the quality and quantity of coaching. You can influence it by putting a bona fide documented career path in place. And as you've seen from some of the prior regression charts, the number of training hours will also have a positive impact on technician job satisfaction. Let me show you the data from Career Path. We've got two sets of data here. The blue diamonds represent agent job satisfaction when there's a career path. It averages 81%. When there is no career path, the fuchsia-colored squares, you can see that the average there is 72.3. So we've got about an 8 percentage point difference when there's a career path versus no career path for agent job satisfaction. Why do we care? Well, because technician satisfaction has a direct impact on customer satisfaction, absenteeism, and turnover. Okay, let's take a look at our final section. This is, we call it marketing, but it's really about proactively managing the message that you want to get out to key stakeholders. First thing I want to do is introduce you to this chart that shows the relationship between the value that's perceived by from outside desktop support and the actual value being delivered by desktop support. So as you go to the right, desktop support is adding more value. As you move up, the perceived value also increases on the y-axis. Now, the only locus of points that makes any sense here is this diagonal line. This is where the perceived value is the same as the actual value. So if your actual value is low and the perceived value is, also low, then the perception is fair. If your actual value delivered is very high and the perception is that the value you deliver is very high, then the perception is fair. So falling on this diagonal is really the fair line, if you will. Whether it's fair perception or fair value being delivered, being on this diagonal line is the only thing that makes any sense. Unfortunately, many support organizations end up in the lower right-hand corner. This is a really common, but it's a dangerous position. The reason it's dangerous is because decisions are based on perception, not reality. So if you're doing a good job, you want to be recognized for doing a good job. But if you're doing a good job and the belief is that you're not doing such a good job, the decisions that are made about desktop support are based on perception, not reality. That might be an incorrect decision to reduce headcount or an incorrect decision to outsource or insource, and we take no position on that. We're neutral on insourcing and outsourcing. The point is that when you're making decisions based on perceptions that are inaccurate, sometimes those decisions are going to be wrong. So you need to recognize that if you're operating down here, you're in a dangerous position. And by the way, the reason this is so common is, we know why it's common, is because when an end user has a positive experience with desktop support, they don't tell anybody. They just assume it's supposed to be a good experience, and they're right. But if they have a bad experience, if the ticket's lost, if the move ad change takes longer than they expect, they tell 10 or 12 or 15 people. And so over time, what happens is the buzz around the office or the anecdotal information is that desktop support is not doing a very good job because the bad news propagates, the good news doesn't go anywhere. And as a result, even though an individual may have had a positive experience with desktop support, what they hear through the grapevine is that, desktop support isn't doing such a good job. This, by the way, is true of level 1 support as well. So you have an obligation to close this gap between perception and reality, and that's what this motion does right here. Now, we're not talking here about, you've heard this expression, putting lipstick on the pig. We're not talking about taking a weak desktop support organization and fooling everybody into thinking that it's a great desktop support organization. That's not it at all. So far, we've talked about how to maximize and improve operational effectiveness. Now we're talking about making sure you get credit for what you're doing, making sure that we call it brand management, making sure that we close this perception gap, because if you are down in this position, it is a dangerous position to be in because, as I mentioned, decisions are based on perception, not reality. So MetricNet has developed a best practices model around messaging, around ensuring that you get credit for the good quality of support that you deliver. There are 5 W's. We define who the key stakeholders are, what the key messages are, how you communicate and when you communicate, where you reach those stakeholders, what channels, and then kind of a rhetorical question, why are we doing this? And I'll answer that question momentarily. In terms of timing, you want frequent contact with your stakeholders at new employee orientation, a little module on what desktop support does, login messages that explain what your services are. When there's IT training going on, there should always be a module on IT service and support, just a brief introduction. During the incident or the ticket itself, you can communicate with your end users, set their expectations about resolution time, and at scheduled sessions, much like what I'm doing right now. Many of our clients now hold weekly or monthly brown bags where they do a webcast to their end users and basically just talk about what desktop support and the service desk are doing. Now, your messaging, you want to get out as many messages as you can. What are your services, your hours of operation? What are some of the initiatives? Are you adopting, for example, a remote diagnostic tool? Are you switching out your ticket management tool, for example? What are your performance levels? What are some of the FAQs, and where do they get posted? Is there a company intranet that you can post those on? And make sure that your stakeholders know about some of your success stories. If you've improved your first contact resolution rate, if you've improved your customer satisfaction, et cetera, make sure people know about that. What about the channels? Well, once again, ubiquitous. Use all available. User liaison newsletters, quarterly, for example, reference guides that are online, customer surveys, login messages that provide, click to chat, click to talk, so that end users can very quickly get to a source of support. These user liaisons, by the way, are representatives within the company. They typically work like in HR or finance or accounting or manufacturing or distribution, and they agree to act as the eyes and the ears for service and support for the level 1 service desk and desktop support. And essentially, they are able to communicate with you, what are the end users thinking, what do they want, in what ways can service and support be improved. And the information also flows the other way from service and support to the end users through these user liaisons. Now, we've all heard this expression, expectations not set are expectations not met. And this is very true when it comes to IT service and support. So we need to take this issue very seriously, and we need to proactively manage expectations. Now, more than a dozen years ago, a client sent this comic to me. It reads, "Delight customers, why can't we just satisfy them like we used to?" Well, you may recall very early on in this presentation, I showed you the concept of customer enthusiasm, which is really the same thing as customer delight. The reason customer satisfaction isn't good enough is because service and support is the gateway to IT for all end users. If customers are merely satisfied, that's not a ringing endorsement of the quality of service and support that you deliver, and it's going to translate into a lukewarm perception of all of IT. But recognizing that service and support is the gateway to IT for almost all end users, you have a special responsibility here and a special opportunity. Your responsibility is to represent IT effectively. Your opportunity is that even though this represents, on average, about 4% of IT spending, what you do at this interface, whether you're a supervisor, a team lead, a level 1, level 2, level 3 technician, whatever it might be, what you do at this interface, whether you're a level 1 tech or a desktop support technician, what you do reverberates throughout the organization. And it will either reverberate in a negative way if the customer does not have a good experience, or it will reverberate in a very positive way. So there's a huge opportunity here to influence customer perceptions for all of IT. So let me summarize what we've learned in this final section. Marketing is about managing the gap between perception and reality. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't cost a lot of money, but it is critically important. What we have found is that the success of the level 1 service desk and desktop support depends as much on your image, which is what this is all about. Image management could be substituted for this title. Depends as much on that as it does on your actual performance. Now, the benefits of managing your image proactively include customer loyalty and positive word-of-mouth referrals, credibility. and this leverages your ability to get things done. You get more done when you're a credible organization. Positive image for IT overall, and high levels of customer satisfaction. So let's summarize what we've learned, and then I want to give you 6 ideas or 6 things that you can do going forward to take advantage and capitalize on today's insights. Let's start with the first component of our model, strategy. Focus on adding value. That means you're preventive and proactive. You're part of an end-to-end support process. Remember the SPOC, single point of contact model. You understand total cost of ownership and the idea that pushing a ticket to level 1 makes sense if it can and should be resolved there. Emphasize first level resolution rate and understand the 3 fundamental sources of value, which is first level resolution, that is minimizing total cost of ownership, returning productive hours to end users, and driving a positive view of all of IT. Secondly, the diagnostic use, the holistic use of key performance indicators. You don't need a large number. We add 7 metrics and a balanced scorecard. You should be benchmarking on an annual basis and understand the cause-effect relationships, the linkages that exist between these KPIs. It's very powerful because it gives you the ability to pull the levers that you need to pull to achieve desired outcomes. For human resource management, investing in technician training and development is not just motherhood and apple pie. There's a real payback from that. And I've shown you how technician job satisfaction, customer satisfaction, and several other metrics will improve when you invest in technician training and development. Make sure that you have a real career path. Provide adequate and high-quality coaching and feedback. I showed you how the scorecard could be redeployed at an individual level to provide that objective feedback. And that's part of driving individual accountability in service and support. Finally, recognize that you have a responsibility to manage your brand, that is, manage your messaging and the internal perceptions, understanding that reality and perception are not the same things, and decisions are based on perception, not reality. View desktop support as an important driver of overall perceptions of IT, and make sure that you're in a position to be able to communicate the value that you add to the organization. So the bottom line on our webcast today is this. Desktop support is now being managed as a strategic asset within the enterprise, one that can reduce the overall cost of IT, dramatically improve productivity of end users. Remember, 17 hours versus 47 hours of lost productivity. You're first quartile versus fourth quartile in service and support. And you have the ability to drive a positive view of IT. Now, strategic desktop support organizations have a number of success factors in common. First, they're part of an end-to-end support organization. Remember the SPOC model. They understand the economics of TCO for user support, and they are actively engaged in maximizing FCR, first contact resolution rate, and first level resolution rate. They use their performance metrics diagnostically. They invest in technician training, coaching, and career pathing. They actively manage their internal messaging, and they aggressively promote and communicate the value that they deliver to desktop support. Now, in a minute, I'm going to get to the questions that are queued up, and it looks like there's quite a few of them. And I'm going to hold a Q&A session in a couple of minutes. But before I do that, I do want to make a few closing remarks. And specifically, there are 6 suggestions here, things that you can do going forward to start to capitalize on some of what you've learned here. If you're at Fusion next Monday or next week at all, I would invite you to attend the session that I'll be delivering on optimization, the trade-off between cost and quality. That'll be next Monday, October 20th at 3 p.m. And again, this is in Washington, D.C. at the Gaylord National Resort. If you'd like to schedule some one-on-one time with me personally at Fusion, you can do so on our website. Just go to metricnet.com/schedule, and you'll see a schedule there where you can sign up for a block of time to have a discussion with me. If you haven't been to our website in a while, I would invite you to go back and take a look, particularly at our resource library, where we offer a whole series of white papers, presentations, recorded webcasts, and the like. Membership is free, becoming a free premium member, but it gives you access to all of our online content. Some of that content's available without being a member, but if you want access to everything and access to it at the moment we publish it, and we publish several things every month, I would invite you to become a premium member. Once again, it's free, but it gives you access to all of our content. If you'd like to follow us on social media, we're active in LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I've included in the presentation itself links to all of our social media sites, and we'd invite you to like us, follow us, and get active in our social media channels. We now have our webcast scheduled out through June of 2015. I've only shown the schedule through April of 2015, but Our webcasts are always free. Next month we'll be talking about call center best practices, and then in January, February, March we will talk about service desk best practices, desktop support best practices, and then once again call center best practices. And then in April we'll be looking at service desk key performance indicators. May we're looking at desktop support key performance indicators, and in June of next year we'll be looking at call center key performance indicators. Once again, our website offers numerous free resources. I'd encourage you to go there, take a look at our white papers, our recorded presentations, our PowerPoint presentations, and the like. If you're interested in benchmarking, we've got a lot of options available for you, including our specific peer group benchmarks, our industry benchmarks, which are downloadable from our website. And for those that want to do it yourself and you just don't have benchmarking data, you can purchase a benchmarking data file from MetricNet. Increasingly, what our clients are telling us is that they like our benchmarks, but they also need MetricNet to help them achieve or implement, if you will, the action plan that results from the benchmark. And so we've implemented earlier this year a new product or a new program called the One-Year Path to World-Class Performance that starts with a benchmark and an ROI calculation, followed by 6 to 9 months of improvement and implementation, and then finally there's a second benchmark and an ROI calculation that definitively proves that you have achieved world-class performance. Finally, you can reach MetricNet in the United States at this phone number, 703-992-7559. There are also forms on our website where you can get in touch with us, or you can simply send an email to info@metricnet.com. Now, for those who have time to stay on for a few more minutes, I will be answering any questions that you typed in during the webcast. And for those of you who need to exit at this time, and I know some of you have, I've been watching the numbers. They haven't dropped a lot, but it looks like maybe 10 or 20 have dropped off so far. If you do need to exit the webcast at this time, I want to thank you for attending the session. I do hope you found it to be informative and insightful. Please don't forget to complete the brief survey that pops up when you exit the webcast. This is a requirement if you wish to receive a copy of today's presentation. So thank you once again. Let me take a look at the questions we've got here. Okay. If you have a question, feel free to type it in. Okay. First question is from Joe. The question is this: what is the industry standard for support desktop text to users? You must have missed that part of the presentation, Joe, but there is no industry standard for desktop text to users. In fact, that's the worst possible metric you can be thinking about. Maybe you joined us a little bit late, but around 2:30 in the afternoon, what I went through was a discussion of workload and how workload is what drives your headcount, not end users. And your workload is a function of many things, including the number of devices the end users have, the age of those devices, the extent to which your environment is virtualized and standardized. It's dependent upon the travel time to and from a ticket. So I can't answer the question because it's based on a false premise. What you really care about, Joe, is the number of tickets generated and broken down by incidents and service requests. You need to know the work time associated with the average incident and the average service request, and you need to know the travel time. Once you know that information, you can size your desktop support organization. You can determine the headcount that you need. But there is no ratio that is appropriate. We've seen environments where literally one tech is needed for every 50 end users. We have also seen environments where one tech was able to support 1,000 or more users. So there is no magic ratio, and that's the wrong question to ask. You really need to focus on workload, which is ticket volume, incident volume, service request volume, travel time, and work time for incidents and service requests. If you know that information, you can size your desktop support organization appropriately. Okay, from Denise, why isn't ticket monitoring a metric on the balanced scorecard where organizations use this as one of the metrics coupled with customer-focused criteria? Denise, I'm not sure what you mean by ticket monitoring. I assume you mean watching tickets to make sure that they don't fall out of the queue or don't breach a service level or something like that. The short answer is that in the scorecard, what we're trying to do is get the biggest benefit from the smallest number of metrics. So we had to make choices about which metrics to include in the scorecard, and we erred on the side of brevity, meaning we want fewer metrics, not more, and we want to roll them together and normalize them so that we can come up with an overall indicator of performance. In terms of ticket monitoring, it's an important function. There's no question about it. But did it make our top 6 list or our top 8 list? The answer is no, it didn't. There were other metrics that we felt were more important, which is why we constructed the scorecard the way we did. However, if you have a difference of opinion, that's fine. You're welcome to use the methodology for the scorecard, create your own scorecard, and include a metric there for ticket monitoring if you think it's important enough. Okay, from Michael, what's a common way to measure travel time per ticket for desktop support? For example, if we have support multiple buildings and the technicians are multitasking, working a variety of incidents and service requests, what you want to do, Michael, is run an experiment for a week or so, a week or 10 days. And what you want to do is every time one of your technicians goes out to the site of a user, whether it's a service request or an incident, and you want them to use a stopwatch on their phone, or if they have a stopwatch on their wrist, that's fine too. But almost every smartphone now has, a stopwatch on it. And if you don't have one, you can download a free app that has a stopwatch. And what you want to do is have them track over a period of a week or 10 days what their travel time to and from the tickets is. That will give you a sample which will get you reasonably close to what your actual travel time is. So let's say over the course of a week or 10 days, you've got 10 technicians and they track, during that time they track 200 tickets and you figure out that your average travel time is 12 minutes each way. That's not a bad way to do it. It's not precise, but it gets you in the ballpark, and that's what you need when it comes to travel time. You just need some reasonable indicator of what your travel time to and from a ticket is. Now, the more advanced, more mature desktop support organizations actually have applications that allow them to put themselves in different modes. Their mobile devices, in fact, you can download apps to your smartphone that allow you to do this. But it's very similar to when you take a package from Federal Express or UPS, for example, you know that they have a handheld device and they make you sign it. Notice after you sign it that they will put themselves in a different work mode. They put themselves back into drive mode or travel mode. But using that handheld device, those drivers will be either in drive mode, they'll be in brake mode, they'll be in delivery mode, they'll be in pickup mode. They'll put themselves in different modes. And at the end of the day, they upload all that data to FedEx or UPS headquarters, and then they track, how much of your time was spent driving, how much was spent delivering, how much was spent picking up, and the like. Well, there are apps that are very similar to that can be downloaded to smartphones, and there are also ticketing apps that allow individuals, with a mobile interface that allow individuals to put themselves in different work modes and track their work time for an incident or service request, track their travel time, track their idle time, track their break time, and the like. Now, I'll be the first to admit that most desktop support organizations don't track those metrics. It's unfortunate because you can't really gauge productivity in desktop support unless you do have a reasonable estimate of travel time per ticket and also work time for incidents and work time for service requests. Okay, next question is from Ken. What's the industry standard response rate for customer satisfaction surveys? There's not a standard per se, but I can tell you what the average is. For email surveys, the average response rate is only about 2.5%. It's not a very big number. If you do a flash survey at the conclusion of a phone call, and I realize in desktop support you don't do a lot of phone calls, it's mostly go out to the side of the user, but a flash survey at the conclusion of an interaction at level 1, the completion rate on a flash survey is a little bit higher. It's about 10 or 12%. If you actually call end users and you conduct interviews with them, most will agree to participate. If you're providing desktop support within a company and you call an end user and you say, hey, yesterday our desktop support technician came out, they moved you to a different building, can I just ask you a few questions about your experience? The vast majority of those people will say yes, and they'll answer your questions. Now, the different channels, whether it's email, flash survey, a live interview, different response rates, but also different costs. An email survey is, no incremental cost really, as opposed to an interview survey that does, cost time and resources. So the costs are different for the different channels, but the response rates are also different for the different channels. So depending upon the channel, Ken, you're going to get different response rates. Also from Ken, regarding technician scorecard, mentoring and teamwork are subjective. How do you accurately rate technicians' performance in those areas? Yeah, I addressed that. You put them on a scale of 0 to 5. And if they're doing a great job, you give them a 5. If they're not doing it or doing a poor job, you give them a 0 or a 1. So you can objectify even subjective criteria like teamwork and mentoring and initiative. You can objectify those by putting them on, and that's no different than customer satisfaction. When you measure CSAT, generally that's on a scale of 1 to 5. Where 5 says you're very satisfied and 1 says you're very dissatisfied, for example. So this is quite common in the realm of measurement and surveying, is the idea of taking something subjective and trying to objectify it by putting a number on it. So those subjective criteria can be quantified. Okay, next question is from Mark. Question is it good practice to publish service level agreements with end users? If so, what do they usually cover? Yeah, it is a good practice. But by publishing, what that means is that they ought to be up on, someplace where they can find it on your intranet, on your desktop support website or your service desk or your IT service and support website. You should publish your service level agreements. Don't expect many users to read them. More than anything else, what you're doing is going through the exercise of creating the SLA, which creates a contract between you and the end users. You're posting it, which is good. So for the curious observer that wants to know what is the SLA, they can find that service level agreement. Service level agreements cover a variety of things. At the very least, they're time-based. For example, mean time to respond to a service request, or an incident, and a ticket. And generally, it's just mean time to respond to a ticket. And then there's mean time to resolve for incidents and service requests. And then there are other metrics such as the percentage of service requests resolved within 3 days, percentage of incidents resolved within 24 hours. Those are the most common time-based service level agreements. Other common service levels that we see are first contact resolution rate. Some of our clients even refer to customer satisfaction as a service level metric, although I disagree with that. So generally, the service levels are going to be time-based, and they address response and resolution time. Increasingly, what we're seeing is things like first contact resolution rate for incidents will be included there, and ticket reopen rate is oftentimes included as a service level as well. For example, you closed a ticket, you thought it was resolved, and the customer calls back and said, no, you did a move ad change, but I was out of town and you moved me to the wrong office or something like that. Well, you got to reopen that ticket. You got to move the person to the right office. So sometimes a ticket reopen rate would be considered one of the service levels as well. Okay, there's a question here from Jim. How do you begin to calculate the cost per incident? Okay, very early on in today's discussion, I talked about that. You want a fully loaded cost, and that cost is going to include your human resources, both your technicians as well as your indirect personnel, such as your supervisors, your team leads, your workforce schedulers, your QA/QC people, and the like. You're going to look at their salaries and benefits. You're also going to look at the space they occupy. Your facilities department should be able to tell you what the cost per square footage of space is. You're going to need your travel expense, your training expense, your telecom expense, and your technology expense, things like licensing fees that you use for your ticketing system. So you want a fully loaded cost, and then you want to divide that by your ticket volume. That gives you your cost per ticket. Now, to get to cost per incident, which is your specific request, you need to, as I mentioned, divide incidents and service requests. Let's just say that the handle time for an incident is 1 hour. That includes both your travel time and your work time. That's 1 hour. Let's say that the handle time for a service request is 3 hours. And again, that's work time plus your travel time. Now, what you're going to do is look at your total cost and your incident volume and your service request volume. And you're going to proportion your costs accordingly based upon your travel time and work time for incidents, your travel time and work time for service requests, as well as the incident volume and the service request volume. I can walk you through the math if you'd like to contact me after the webcast today, but essentially what you're going to be doing is taking the handle time per incident multiplied by the incident volume per month, the handle time per service request multiplied by the service request volume per month, and you're going to come up with a number of minutes. Let's say it's 20,000 incident minutes and 50,000 service request minutes. So it's 20 and 50. Let me come up with a better number. 20,000 service request minutes and 40,000 service request minutes, 20,000 incident minutes, for a total of 60,000 incidents. But a third of the workload is incidents and 2/3 of the workload is service requests. So you're going to take your total cost divided by the number of tickets. That'll give you your cost per ticket. To get the cost per incident, what you want to do is look at 1/3 of the total cost, which is your incident cost, divided by the incident volume, which will give you your cost per incident, and then 2/3 of your total cost divided by your service request volume, which will give you your cost per service request. I hope that was clear. If not, as I said, I'm happy to either email you or have a discussion with you about how you break your cost per ticket down into cost per incident, cost per service request. Okay, a question from Amanda. Will the survey be at the end of the webinar? Yeah, Amanda, when you exit GoToWebinar, a survey will pop up that allows you to answer 3 questions about our survey, or about our webcast. And if it doesn't, for any reason, just shoot me an email. but generally it works fine. As you're exiting GoToWebinar, a survey will pop up, and you just have to answer that, and then we'll send you a copy of today's presentation. Okay, I'm getting to the end of the questions, so if you do have a question, feel free to type it in. The last one on the list here is from Ed, and his question is, if you benchmark reopen rates, if so, what is considered world-class? You know, there's a remarkably small number of standards in this industry, Ed, so you know, I would stop short of saying that there's a world-class number. What I can tell you is what the average is and what a top quartile number is and what a bottom quartile number is. You're going to be in the best quartile if your reopen rate is 3% or less. You're going to be in the second quartile if your reopen rate is 3 to 6%. You're going to be in the third quartile if your reopen rate is 6 to 10%, and you're going to be in the fourth quartile if your reopen rate is above 10%. So that will give you some guidance in terms of what is considered good performance, what is considered weaker performance. Okay, from Maliki, it looks like. I hope I got that name right. Will you send everyone the presentation? Yes, we will. Just answer the short questionnaire that pops up when you exit the GoToWebinar, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of today's presentation. Let's say, that was the last question. If you have any other questions, please feel free to type them in. I'd be more than happy to answer them. If not, we'll close down our webcast. Just want to thank all of you once again for participating in our webcast today. I know that all of you are very busy people, and the fact that you were able to take time out of your schedule to join MetricNet today on our Desktop Support Best Practices webcast, it means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. I do hope, as I mentioned a moment ago, that you found the session to be informative and insightful. Don't forget to complete the survey when you exit the webcast. It should pop up automatically. It's just 3 questions. It takes about 15 seconds to answer. So thank you once again. That concludes today's webcast.